Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. My name is Danny.
And I'm 𝐶𝐿𝐴,
and this is our 30th episode.
Well, this is exciting. Got my buddy Christian over here who paid us a surprise visit. Why don't you tell everyone how Christian surprised me, Danny?
So Christian and I have been planning him coming here for like a month to surprise 𝐶𝐿𝐴, and it's been really hard to keep it a secret. I'm not very good at keeping secrets, and I was having anxiety about it all month. But then on the day of, I had to find a way to get 𝐶𝐿𝐴 to drive all the way into Boston with me without complaining, because I knew he wanted to train in the morning, and I was just like, no, let's train tonight, which is completely out of character. So he was like, what are you talking about? We trained in the day. And I was like, yeah, but I feel like training tonight. And that didn't go over super well. So we were getting ready to go to the gym, and then I had to fake a phone call from my sister that she was going into labor and being taken into Beth Israel in Boston. And yeah, 𝐶𝐿𝐴 was really worried because that would make her 6 weeks early. But when we got to the airport, I was like, oh, how are we going to get to the airport without him like seeing that we're at the airport and not at a hospital? But he was just looking down at his phone the whole time because I was driving. So he didn't even see us drive like through Terminal A and Terminal B. And then when he finally looked up, he was like, why are we at the airport? And Christian was already walking around the car. So that was pretty cool. So Christian, how's your trip been going so far?
It's probably been the fastest week of my life. It always happens like this. You know, you wait for a month, and that month feels like the longest month of your life. And then you're here for a week, and it comes and goes. And it's like I slept, and I woke up, and now I'm leaving tomorrow.
And we've been like the worst hosts ever, because the day after Christian got here, I actually went in for surgery, which I tried to reschedule because I knew that timing wasn't so great for like his trip in here, but I couldn't reschedule it. And 𝐶𝐿𝐴 was like, why do you want to reschedule it? That's stupid. Get it done with now. So I did, but it actually worked out really well because Christian and 𝐶𝐿𝐴 took super good care of me while I was recovering. I just feel bad because I slept like 50% of the time that Christian was here. So sorry about that.
Well, all I know is I feel like there couldn't be a better way to start the podcast. I mean, personally, I'm not really up and alert at night, and we're kind of recording pretty late right now. But let's see, we had pizza.
Sin dogs. Thanks, Stephanie.
Yup. And cookies right before this podcast, so I'm ready. But yeah, I mean, we've done a little bit of food exploring. Hit up, Veggie Galaxy when you first got here immediately, because, I mean, Veggie Galaxy, right? And so we went somewhere where we haven't been to in a while, actually. This place called 𝐬𝐿𝐴, and they make this buffet, and it just so happens that just about everything on it is vegan, and it's great. Just for the fact that you can go into the restaurant, and it's very family style oriented, and you go in and you say, can you tell me what's vegan? And they point out everything that's vegan, and pretty much almost everything is. You know it's going to be a good time.
What'd you think of it, Christian?
The Indian food was pretty good. It had only been my second time really having authentic Indian food. People there, we had to wait like 20 minutes before being seated. So you can tell that's going to be a good meal if you have to wait.
If you're ever in the Boston area, maybe if you're staying outside of Boston, it's in Lowell, and it's a little bit hidden. It's tiny, family run. It's really, really good. So I suggest checking it out. So how have your workouts been, guys? I haven't really been able to work out much since I had the surgery, but I have been doing blood flow restriction training a little bit. It's still a little bit too much for me right now, but how's your training been going, guys?
Usually I wake up at the crack of dawn. I wake up, don't even eat pre-workout meal. I go to the gym, do my lifts, go home. But here in with the Vegan Proteins crew, we wake up, go a little later. I actually in pre-workout meals every day since I've been here. I have my preset regimen for the day, and I can do that comfortably at home and not have to worry. But here it's just a little more improvising than I'm used to, but I just kind of go with it and not stress, because all we do here is we live, eat, breathe, and lift all the time. So I wasn't in a hurry. 𝐶𝐿𝐴, his workouts are a little longer than mine.
It's because my epic 20-minute rests in between sets because powerlifting.
I mean, between 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐿 sets, I can take a pretty good nap and wake up recovered.
It's actually been nice to have Christian around, so I have like another normal person to compare workout times to, because usually I finish my workout and I will just like walk on the treadmill and watch literally like an hour of TV on my phone while I'm waiting for 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐿. And then after that I get off and I'm just like, how long do you have? How much time do you have left? What do you have left? So it was nice to have Christian also be sitting there just waiting, because I was like, oh, I'm not the weird one who has super fast workouts. 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐿 is just insane.
I mean, I still had like 70 more minutes of rest and 2 minutes of sets to go. And they're like both on the bench waiting for me, like glaring at me. I'm like, come on, I have lots of rest to do on the gym floor.
I mean, I can't really complain. He did share his candy with me, so
That's true.
You know, gains.
Yep.
How was your training this week, 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐿?
Man, I've been on cloud 9 actually this past week, because usually with the powerlifting thing, I'm constantly focused on seeing how much more I can increase my working weights, and it's slow, like a pound here, a pound there. But I decided to switch my form on squats from high bar to low bar, which is something I've been mulling over for over a year actually. But I shied away from doing low bar because I've always done high bar, and I learned at a very young age. I'm like, why am I gonna fuck with something if it's working? But I gave it a shot because the data shows that most people, not all, but most people can move more weight. And that's the name of the game in powerlifting. Move more weight. Doesn't matter how you're training your muscles, as long as you can lift more. So I was at a mechanical advantage in low bar. I went for it, and my squat jumped up by 15, 20 pounds overnight. I don't even have the form down yet. So I'm pretty happy. Yeah, other than that, I have no real complaints about training. I think it's very inspiring. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the regiment and the grind where you're waking up at the same time, you're eating a meal at the same time, and you're training at the same time, because that repetition really gets you in the groove. However, there are exceptions to the rule where I can be equally as, if not more, motivated. And those times generally revolve around when I'm amongst really good company, especially people that I don't get to see very often. Having Christian here is like a mini plant-built family for me all over again, where I'm amongst like-minded individuals. And if there's ever going to be a time where I'm stepping out of my regimen and my groove, it's going to be to train with my fellow vegan lifting fam.
So, I mean, on the scale of like surgeries, it wasn't really a serious surgery compared to like heart surgery or something like that, but I've never had surgery before, so it was serious to me. Basically, they found some precancerous cells on my cervix, and they had to remove them and send them away for testing and stuff like that. So it's a pretty gnarly place to have surgery, like physically on your body. And also, nobody can see it, so you look like you're totally fine, but it's really painful, actually. They gave me some painkillers and stuff, and I definitely utilized those in the first 48 hours pretty heavily. Yeah, and I totally missed workouts that day. But then the day after that, I went to the gym and just did BFR training, which I think we've talked about on this podcast before. It's where you basically cut off the blood supply to your extremities and lift really, really, really light. So basically, if you think about having your pelvic floor area cut into, you absolutely do not want to brace like you would brace in heavier lifts at all. So by lifting really light loads, and I mean like really, really light loads, like I was doing calf raises with 20 pounds on the machine. But you do like 60, actually you do like 75 reps in a very short period of time. And you get a good pump, and it still drives like hypertrophy. The first day was actually mostly okay. And then I just walked on the treadmill, and then we actually went to Salem, Mass, which was cool because Christian had never been there. And we went to the Witch Museum and Count Olaf's Gallery of Nightmares, which was really cool. But we did a lot of walking there too, was the point. And the next day I definitely felt it. So I stayed home that day. And then today, I think today was the only other day I've trained since then. And it was rough, actually. About halfway through the like scheduled BFR, I was like, yeah, no, fuck this. And I went on the treadmill. And then about 15 minutes into that, I was like, yeah, no, too much still. So then I sat on the recumbent bike. And I felt pretty defeated, but I was still happy that I was able to get anything done at all. But surgery went well overall. We'll get final results in a few weeks, and hopefully it's no big deal. So, whatever. Moving right along to our topic today is something that we've been talking about all week, actually, and that is sportsmanship in the arena of bodybuilding. So we have witnessed some incidents at the past few bodybuilding events that we've been to that really have brought up the topic of sportsmanship and how you handle your placing at shows and things like that. And it is not something that I think a lot of people, especially people new to bodybuilding, really understand what to expect going into a show, and that it's not really something that you can train to win for. And we'll explain that more in a minute. But yeah, definitely thought this was a topic that we could dive into. So I guess by your definition, guys, what would you call, what is sportsmanship to you?
When I think of what sportsmanship means to me, I think it means showing appreciation and respect for the competition that you are partaking in and everything about it, from your own participation in regards to the participation of others, in regards to the rules, and just making sure that you put on a good show, regardless of your own personal feelings about how you performed, how others performed, or how the judges, because I guess we're talking about bodybuilding, judged the event. I mean, it's your reaction and the way that you experience and play the game.
To me, sportsmanship can be interpreted in many different ways. Well, first of all, you train for months or years or however long you've trained up until the competition. Initially, you may not know who you're competing against. It can be people who have been training longer than you have. It can be people who have been training less time than you have. And when you're up there, you go out there, you do your best, and you can't really control what the judges think. Up until the competition, you've done everything you can do. You put in the work, and other people have too. And the judges are in charge of the results, and you're not. So whether you place first, you place last, you place somewhere in between, you don't necessarily have to be happy where you placed. But it's just about being respectful to other people who have also put in the work. The whole thing in and of itself is just experience. The deeper you get into competitions, the better you get at them. And whether or not you're happy with how you placed in the competition, what's important is that you went out there, you competed, you put yourself out there, something that many cannot do.
Yeah, I think you guys both touched on what I think is the key component to sportsmanship, and that is respect. And you both said that. So I guess the question is, why does sportsmanship matter so much, specifically in the sport of bodybuilding?
I think sportsmanship matters because bodybuilding, well, it's a large sport, but compared to football or the NBA, it's small. It's a smaller community. People know each other a little better. There's names out there that you can recognize. Yeah, there's people out there you recognize, and you're going to run into them in other competitions because people do travel for this sport. So the more competitions you do, you build a reputation over time. People get to know you. You get to know other people.
I know what you mean, because we keep, I know what you mean, because it's a really, really small community. And the other thing about bodybuilding is that as much as it's a head-to-head competition when you get up there on stage, in some ways, it's also an incredibly individual sport and a very personal sport. I mean, the majority of your energy and your effort and everything you do to become the best version of yourself, you do by yourself, and you actually isolate yourself when you get into becoming a competitive bodybuilder, to get in the zone and to do what you want to do. And I think when you get on stage and you realize that you're up there amongst other people doing it, that's the time to come together. You know, I mean, the placing shouldn't matter. The competition shouldn't matter. Those are like small components of the experience. And I think there should be that mutual respect for one another as competitors, realizing every single person on that stage, regardless of how long they're doing it for, took it to that level. And that should never, that there, I don't think there's anything that should ever be taken away from that. And unfortunately, since, you know, to reiterate, we're talking about sportsmanship here. I think that people can really miss the mark on that because they don't understand how their actions and their reactions can affect the other competitors on stage, you know?
It's really easy for everybody up there to think they had the hardest prep of everybody up there, and they put in the most work and they dialed everything in the hardest, so they deserve to win because the last 4 months has been hell for them. But you have no idea what the other people on stage went through to get where they are. And maybe you do have the hardest prep, or maybe you didn't, but it doesn't matter. All that matters is what shows up on that stage that day. And even then, there's lots of reasons why that may not have you win or lose. And part of that is because of the reputation that you build over time. Like Christian said, it's a small community, especially the natural bodybuilding community. And you do see the same faces every show you go to, or lots of the same faces over and over again. And if you're the person who threw a fit or pouted their way off stage, then people are going to remember that at the next show. And it could very well be a lot of the same judges. And whether they intend to or not, it's really hard to not hold poor sportsmanship against a competitor that's on stage.
In the professional bodybuilding world, you know, you see rivalries between Phil Heath and Kai Green, and, you know, there is beef between them, and you kind of go and if you're a spectator, you kind of ask yourself, what's going to happen this time? Like, is there going to be a fight, or are they going to be a little better about placing, or... Because, you know, it's a very competitive sport.
I think it's important to remember that the pros at the top, like Phil Heath and Kai Green, a lot of that beef that they have, so to speak, is pretty manufactured for the audience as well. Kind of like professional wrestling in a way where, yeah, obviously they want to beat the other person, but a lot of that, like, edging each other off the stage and the smack talking that they do beforehand, a lot of that is specifically for the hype, to keep people engaged and keep them interested in what's going on. And when you bring that down to a smaller local level, it's not funny. It doesn't engage the crowd. It basically just makes people think you're a dick, you know? So it is a good point. And people will remember you. And there's nothing that pisses people off more than somebody that is a poor sport about things. And, you know, we just talked about the judging and how sometimes they can hold a grudge against people who have shown poor sportsmanship in the past. But even if you haven't shown poor sportsmanship, it's important to remember that the judges are human. And what makes this sport so different from so many other sports is that the judging is 100% subjective. There is a criteria for each category, but it is very, very loose. You know, you look at people who run sprints, like, you know who won, you know who came in second and third and fourth, etc., because it is very, very clear when people cross the finish line. Even things that sometimes seem subjective, like gymnastics or figure skating, there are things that they need to execute in a very specific way, and they get judged on that. With bodybuilding, and even more so divisions like physique and bikini, a lot of it is just like, what do you think looks the best? And that's going to vary so much from judge to judge.
And show to show, actually. You can bring the same exact package to two different sets of judges, and one panel will put you at the top, and the other panel may not even place, actually. And that's just it. I mean, you can't really get hung up on a judging panel that, you know, for whatever reason, you know, maybe you did bring a better package than another competitor, but if for whatever reason or another, even if you showed it on stage, if they were drawn to another competitor, you know, it's nothing personal, and that can vary from show to show, and it could be for any number of reasons. And that's the other thing. I mean, I think people, you know, they get so hung up on their actual placing that they don't realize that the judging itself is cumulative. So say you have 10 judges, right? And, I would say more than half of the judges voted you up. You can take it. I can't explain it.
When he says cumulative, it means like 10 judges are going to place everybody on stage first through last. And you could be put in a different spot by every single judge down there. Somebody could have you in first, someone could have you in fifth, someone could have you in seventh, and you could end up in third, which none of them picked you for. You know what I mean? Just because it's cumulative. A lot of people think that the judging in bodybuilding is like a unanimous decision, like they all huddle together and pick the winner, and it doesn't work like that at all. Usually it's not where someone has you in first and someone has you in fifth and seventh. It's usually more like someone has you in second, someone has you in third, and whoever, if more people have you in third, then you generally end up in third, for example. But it's definitely nowhere near a unanimous decision.
And kind of going on the note that the sport's totally subjective, like if there's 10 judges, each of them aren't going to want the same thing. Some will go for the competitor that has better conditioning. Some will go for the ones that have better symmetry or size. And even if you have all three, someone else can have something that the judges want. Even if you have the best physique up there, it doesn't mean that the judges are going to necessarily pick you for first, because they may not be looking for what you have.
And it also totally goes the other way as well. I noticed this at my very first competition when I was shocked that I placed as high as I did. Like, to me, looking at the pictures afterwards, I saw other girls that I thought should have placed ahead of me, but they didn't. For whatever reason, the judges that day put me ahead of them. And maybe they went home saying, God damn it, I got robbed of a placing because that girl got an extra placing. But over time, like as you compete in this sport for a long time, it's going to go both ways. Sometimes you're going to feel like you got robbed a placing by someone who placed ahead of you that maybe didn't deserve to. But sometimes you're going to be the person that's robbing someone else of a place, and you might go home feeling a little bit bad about how well you placed in front of somebody else. I think all three of us can speak on the fact that we have been in these situations ourselves where we got placings that perhaps we were not too happy with, and that's just the way that the game goes. Do either of you want to talk about that?
And when you're on stage, the one thing you don't want to do is psych yourself out right away. Some competitors will start out on the very edge and move towards the middle, but just because you got call-outs and got placed towards the middle doesn't mean you locked in first. And you don't want to start getting excited and get into your head and claim the victory internally, because someone who got moved from the middle out to the outside can still take first. And if you think you placed based on where the judges placed you on stage, and you start to kind of adopt the mindset that you won or you lost just because your stage placement, you can start going down a path. You can end up really disappointed, or you can end up really excited, or it can catch you by surprise, but nothing's set in stone until it's set in stone.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess the other thing you have to remember about placings is that sooner or later in this type of sport, you're just going to get better and better over time. And eventually, you're going to get placed ahead of the pack if you just persist with it. And if you lose your motivation because you're so hung up on your placings your first couple years in, or, 5-7 years in the sport, you're down, you're in store for a real, a rough road, so to speak, and a miserable road. And, I think you just need to be patient with the sport and accept the process for what it is.
I mean, I remember at your first competition, Christian, which you prepped your ass off for, and it was like your first year lifting. Like, you'd only been lifting for like a year and a half, right?
Not even. I'd been lifting for, I'd started lifting the June before, actually a year, yeah.
Yeah, so about a year. And you placed third out of 3. How did you feel about that, I guess, and how did you handle it?
On the bright side, I was guaranteed a placement. I did place, I went into that show not knowing what to expect. When I got on stage and found out there's only 3 competitors, it's tough because you're guaranteed a place, but where you place is up in the air.
And relative, right? To how many people you're on stage with. You know what I mean? Like, so like if you got 5th out of 15, that's actually really good. That's the top third. But if you got 5th out of 5, maybe you end up not being so happy about it, even though you still placed technically.
Yeah, with 3 people in my class, I was guaranteed to place, like I said, and getting third was it was rough for me because I busted my ass. I put in the time, I put in the hours. My body fought me tooth and nail through the competition. And like Danny said earlier, you don't know who had the hardest contest prep. You could have had the hardest contest prep. Someone else could have had the hardest contest prep. So getting third out of third was rough. I went backstage after the show and just I let my emotions get the better of me, but I didn't let my placing affect my views of other competitors.
Or your stage presence.
Yeah.
That's what I remember from the audience anyway. You still looked very happy to be getting your trophy. And I think not everybody does that. Some people hear their placing and you can literally just see their face fall. And to me, that in and of itself is poor sportsmanship.
And while I didn't get first, what I did get from that competition more than anything while I went out there was for the experience. I had never competed before. I didn't know what to expect. But walking away with the experience and just gives you a better idea of how to go along with the show the next time you compete. Because if you beat yourself up over where you placed in your first competition,
it's silly. I mean, because it's your first competition. Like, you are only going to get better from there. You know what I mean? And you did, actually. Very much so. And you're continuing to become a much better bodybuilder, like literally before our eyes this season, which is really cool. But I guess that's neither here or there. I mean, you are in a position where you very easily could have been a piss poor sport and thrown a fit. But you didn't do that. And it was your first show ever, and you still didn't do that. And to me, that says more about how you're going to be as a bodybuilder in the long run than what your physique actually looked like on stage that day.
Yeah, and placing third out of third, I did get into my own head about it, and I thought about it. I kind of mulled it over, and while I felt unmotivated and just a little disheartened at the time, I just kind of took that and eventually turned it around and just told myself, well, I got third out of third this time, but if I keep doing this, next time I compete, it can be a completely different experience. I can lock in a better placing in a larger class, which did happen in my second competition the following year. I think my contest prep was a little rougher. My body fought me even worse. I was doing twice as much cardio as the previous season, and I did compete in a class of 5 in novice, and I locked in second. My conditioning wasn't the greatest, but I had size and symmetry, and people who placed below me had better conditioning
Or size.
They had better conditioning or size, but the judges were looking for something specific, and the person who did beat me took the overall in the novice category, and he told me his backstory about how he got injured and he is forced to take time off of lifting heavy, and he was basically he had plans to compete, but he got injured and was forced to take a longer off season, which ultimately he used to his advantage. He had a long, I think he said a 50-week cut, which is really long for a cut, and he went out there as soon as he was able to compete, and he locked in first in lightweight and overall, and he could have let that injury defeat him and quit the sport completely, but he put in the work just like everyone else on stage and took first, and he was proud of it, and I was happy for him, because if you get injured when in training, who's to say you may or may not come back to the sport. You may give up, you may keep going, even if you don't know what's for certain. Even though that competition season or the on season for that year was a little rougher, I was expecting to not place as well as I did, because I just going into the competition, I wasn't happy with how prepared I was, but I did end up placing well, and that kind of gave me a little relief because I was stressing so much about not being in prime condition or as good as I wanted to be, but I went out there and just did my best, and I was happy with where I placed.
Right, and I think that basically accepting where you're at and not getting caught up on placings is what's going to give you the chance to stick with the sport. You know, you see individuals who get so bent out of shape when they're their first, and I mean, I can't stress this point enough. This is not the type of sport that you're just going to become elite in overnight. It's not going to happen in 2 years. It's not going to happen in 5 years. I don't care how genetically gifted you are. If you want to be the best person, the best version of yourself out there on stage, it's going to take 10 years or more.
But regardless, even the elite have to compete against each other, and somebody's going to get first and somebody's going to get last. And as far as the idea of sportsmanship, I mean, we've seen pro shows where people have thrown their trophies down on the stage like children.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. I mean, you're talking about a whole different facet of it, because when you get to that point where you know that you have the ability to chase for that pro card, or you know that you are already a pro and that you're one of the better pros, and so you're going into those shows with a whole different kind of mindset. Like, man, I want to get one of those top placings. And so that's a whole different facet of this sport, where you're trying your best to win or lose gracefully based on how the judges are going to place you.
But regardless of whether it's your first competition or you're gunning for the world championships, the need for sportsmanship is going to be the same completely across the board. That is something that is not going to change from day 1 to day 1000. And partially it's because there's nothing you can do about your competition. You're not going to outperform your competition on show day. I mean, outside of like screwing up your peak week, I guess, but that has absolutely zero bearing on the competition. Like, you're not going to play head games with them and get an inch ahead or anything like that. That would be ridiculous. And you can't control what they look like, and you can't control what the judges want. So you need to have that essence of good sportsmanship all the way through your entire bodybuilding career, because if you don't, you are going to have a really bad time.
And in any sport, not just bodybuilding, one of the few inevitable things you have to realize is that not everyone can get first place. Someone's going to place second, someone's going to place third, someone's going to place where they don't want to place. And whether or not they're happy with that placement, they just have to accept it, because if you let your placing in a single competition defeat you and you say, screw it, I'm not going to compete again, then you throw in the towel, then you don't have a chance for redemption. You don't have a chance to show yourself you can do better. You know, you make the experience what you want to make it. And if you decide to quit, then so be it. If you turn it around and say, oh, my third place is third place this time, but who's to say next year I can do so much better. And if you go out there next year and take first and someone takes third, you know, they're in the same position that you were in when you didn't place as well as you wanted to place. So just being persistent and realizing that whether you're the winner or 15th, not everyone's going to place where they want to place.
And I think it's important to reiterate what I said before. If you stick this sport out and you compete in it over a course of several years, you're going to be on both sides of that at some point. At some point, you're going to be the person who didn't place, and you're going to be the person who placed really, really well. And you need to be able to accept both of those situations gracefully. I can use Plant Built last year as an example of, I came in looking at that point the best I ever had, and I had won the show the year prior, so I was, hoping to do better than that the following year. And it was a class of like 13 or something, and I was competing with 13 other athletes, one of them who's Simone Collins from Australia, who I had just met, and I had been ogling her delts online for years. And when we actually were side by side, I realized, yeah, obviously she's got the conditioning and she's got the upper body, but I thought maybe I had her in the lower body and just overall shape. So I was like, depending on what the judges are looking for, like, I may have a chance. And in my opinion, the competition wasn't as competitive that year as it had been the year prior. And this time I didn't place at all. I did not place at all. And I was kind of bummed out about it, actually. I ended up being the only bodybuilder on Plant Built who didn't place last year, which sucked. And yeah, I was pretty bummed out about it, but I never let that show on my face to the other competitors because, well, for several reasons, but one of them is if competitors are like crying backstage, how do you think that makes the people who placed really well feel? It's like they can't even enjoy their win because they know that other people are really upset about it. Or at least if it was me, if it was the other way around, I would feel really bad if I saw other people crying backstage because they didn't place. So there's no place to sit there and pout and sulk. And I think it's completely normal to feel down if you don't place well. But you want to kind of like lick your wounds in private, I think. That sounds so wrong.
In my first competition, I placed third, and while I was bummed out, I went backstage and people were happy for me. They were rejoicing at the fact that I competed, I did my best. And even though I wasn't all too thrilled about placing third at a third, people were happy for me. And if I went back there and if I just, I kicked my bag or showed that I was mad, then, it kind of takes the fun out of it all. Because if people are happy for you and you can't be happy for yourself, that takes away from the experience in itself. Like Danny said, if you go backstage and start crying, the person who placed above you and who is extremely proud of the work they put in and the results that they got, it just kind of puts a damper on everybody's day.
No, exactly. You're exactly right, Christian, and that's just the way that it should be, is that everyone should be supporting one another back there as competitors. It's actually, I'm trying to think back to every single show that I've ever done, and it's been more than a handful, probably 2 handfuls worth of shows over time, and I can't remember ever once being mad at another competitor, whether I placed last or whether I placed first. And, furthermore, the longer and longer I compete, the happier I get around other competitors, regardless of my placing, because I remember that I love this sport and I love the fact that I get to get together with other people whom I've never met before. And at the end of the day, we are all like, hey, we were just in this whole show together, and that's pretty freaking awesome. There's one particular organization, the OCB, that I competed at my last competition season. And I was really happy about the way that they ran things. I mean, the camaraderie back there that the promoters and the expediters and whatnot fostered was awesome. I mean, we would line up backstage, and basically we were all encouraged to pretty much high-five each other and sort of, and I didn't see that 5 to 10 years ago, but the last couple of shows that I did, and it was OCB in specific, it was like everybody was encouraged to lift each other up back there, and I think that's something special, and we shouldn't forget about that and how much that means to the other competitors, and for the game itself.
I remember, but 2 years ago, I competed on a stage with Tiffany Burich, and I remember after I placed first, she placed third, and afterwards, some people were asking me, like, basically if her and I were butting heads, like if we were arguing or bitter towards one another or anything like that. And I remember us both just being so confused, like, no, why would we be? Like, we're like sisters. It's one of us was going to place higher than the other one. That's just the way it goes. Could have been her, could have been me. And same thing last year when Simone got second and I didn't place at all. It never even once crossed my mind to be upset with Simone. It didn't even cross my mind. Simone was so happy. Remember, she came backstage and put her trophy on her head and did that cute little pose with her trophy on her head, and it was adorable. I mean, she came to the U.S. and competed in the U.S. for the first time ever, and she placed second. That's awesome. I was super, super happy for her. And you can be happy for someone else and still bummed with your own placing without them being sort of dependent on one another. You know what I mean?
The bodybuilding community being such a tight-knit community at times, there is a high probability you can compete against your best friend in the same class. And going into the show, your best friends, and on stage, your rivals. But if you let your placing affect your relationships, it can either make them better, it can make them worse. It depends on your reaction to the results.
Totally. And I think you need to sort of practice your sportsmanship beforehand. Like, you know, a lot of people like to envision themselves winning first and use that as like a visualization tactic before the show. But it's kind of important to visualize yourself not doing well beforehand as well, so that you're not just absolutely shocked and appalled, because it could go any way and you want to gracefully accept it no matter which way it goes. So that's just a little tip.
That's very true, actually. Last year, that kind of happened to me where I had finally placed first at a show for the first time in a very long time, and I had one more show left in the season, and that next show, I think I placed like third or fourth, but I went into it thinking, man, I took first this last show, and I went up in the overall, and I could have got a pro card. I didn't get it, so I'm going to do this next show, and man, I visualizing myself possibly doing that this next show, and I got up there, and I had that in my mind, and I placed like fourth or third. I don't remember, out of like a lineup of 6 or 7, but all I know is like, you know, I just, it was almost a letdown to me because I went in with these expectations. And that kind of like, it was what I was talking about earlier in this episode, where, you know, you get to that point where you know you're getting competitive and you sort of have to still check yourself if you don't place where you want to, you know, and bow out gracefully at the end of the season.
Because every show is its own beast. And you can't look at it like, well, I placed second in this show, I must just be getting better. I'm going to win first next time. Because every show is an entirely different game. So you have to think about it as, yeah, you're a better competitor, but every time you walk into a show, you're kind of starting from scratch.
And going into any given show, whether you have high expectations, low expectations, you know, your expectations aren't reflective of your placing, because you can have really, really high expectations. Like 𝐬𝐿𝐵 said, he placed first in the previous competition, but went into the next competition placing third or fourth. His expectations of himself didn't lock in his placing in his following show. He got third or fourth, not the first place he was hoping for. But it can be at the other side of the spectrum too, where you can think, oh, I'm not as good as I was last show, or you know, I'm not in peak condition, and you're not going to expect to place well. But at the same time, you can go into that show with low expectations, and you can very well take first, because the judges want what the judges want. It's not something you can plan for.
And I think this, what we're talking about today, is a huge reason why so many people really dislike the sport of bodybuilding and don't understand it, because you can't look at a stage full of people and say, well, there's the winner, and just know it's the winner. So it's confusing for a lot of people. Like, I've sat in the audience with people watching bodybuilding shows and had them just lean over and be like, I can't tell the difference. And I get that. I do understand that. I think that is part of why it is so, so, so important to get into competing in bodybuilding for the right reasons. And I kind of want to hear you guys talk about what you think the right reasons are, since we just talked a lot about why competing for the placing is very clearly the wrong reason.
To me, competing for the right reasons means that basically the competition itself is just one very, very small facet of the big picture of why you're bodybuilding. Here's the deal. I love competing. I love competition, and I thrive on it, actually. I mean, all my life, I've played sports from a very young age. I love going head-to-head with people. I love all of it. But I also know that playing the sport and embracing the competitive aspect of it will not define myself as an athlete. What defines me as an athlete is becoming the best possible version of myself. And as far as it pertains to bodybuilding, that's what I go up against. And it's something that I've tried to tell myself over and over again until I can hopefully continue to work on becoming the embodiment of it, where it's every time I get out there, I know for a fact that I am going to have brought a better package than the last time that I stepped on stage. And if I've done that, I've won. I've hit the fucking jackpot. There's no way I could get any higher. As far as the placings, to me, that's like the icing on the cake. However, it's also another part of the game. Like I said, I thrive on that. I love the competition, but it does not define the reasons why I choose to be a hardworking athlete. I do that because I love what I do. And I think it's very important to remind yourself of that when you step into the sport, and to not get lost in the process of judgings and wondering what everyone's thinking about you. Oh, I'm the third place person. Why should I even do this anymore? It's like, no, that's not what it's about, What about you, Christian? I mean, what drives you to be a part of bodybuilding? What drives you to bring it to the point where you're competing?
I don't think there really are any right or wrong reasons to compete. Your reasons are your reasons alone, Everyone has something that motivates them, and if it motivates you to compete, then that's your reason. For me, I don't like placing myself out there. I don't like being the center of attention. I don't, I get people anxious. I don't like crowds, but when I decided to compete, it was because I saw Plant Built compete. The team I'm on now, they competed in 2013 for the first time, and I saw what their intent was, and they had the intention to show that you can live a cruelty-free lifestyle without needing animal proteins to become an elite athlete. And that kind of inspired me to set aside my anxieties around being the center of attention, because I too wanted to show that if I put in the work and do my best, that I can also show people that you don't need animal products or to consume animal protein, just go out there and be a great athlete.
So whatever the reason, I mean, never forget that everyone else that you're out there has their own personal reason that is way more important than a placing ever should be. So many people out there are just happy about the fact if they've made a transformation, that they've, for whatever, they've overcome so many different obstacles to get there. And, there's nothing that can take that away from the other competitors faster than people basically becoming catty, for lack of a better word, about placings. You go out there, you enjoy the process, and that's that.
Moving on to our product review segment today, we are actually going to be talking about a corn product, 𝐸𝐻, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with the corn products. They're in most major supermarkets across the country, and as I'm sure almost everybody is thinking right now, corn products are not vegan. They are a meatless alternative, but up until this point, they have all had egg in them as a binder, and for many years, vegans have been saying, like, what the heck, corn? Why aren't these vegan? And Corn has responded by coming out with a vegan line. And as of right now, I believe it's just 4 products, and we tried some of them today, and we're going to talk about the vegan corn spicy chicken patty, which we tried today. So what makes corn different from Boca or Gardein or even Beyond Meat is that it's not made out of soy or gluten or pea protein. The protein that they use is called mycoprotein, and I don't know if that name is trademarked or not, but mycoprotein is made from a fungus called Fusarium venenatum, which I could very well be pronouncing wrong, and then it is fermented to create this plant-based protein. And usually they add egg to all of their products to hold them together, but they must have been working on it to find ways to do it without that, because they have these products. And we tried 2 products today. the spicy chicken patty, and then something called chicken cutlets, which kind of reminded me of like diced up bits of Beyond Meat. But the spicy chicken patty was definitely the standout of the two. It was really, really good. It reminded me of like the spicy boca chicken patties, but heartier, I guess. The breading around it had some herbs in it, and the macros on it are okay. It's kind of like an equal part carbs, fat, and protein. It's not particularly high in protein, but it is quite tasty. So if you see it, definitely I suggest picking it up, especially because the more people who purchase Quorn's new vegan products, the more encouraged they're going to be to keep coming out with vegan products or making some of the products they already have actually vegan. So I'm not sure how many of them are in stores yet, but what did you think of it, Christian? Because I know you tried it too.
I thought it was really good, actually. The flavor was there. It was balanced and had a nice kick to it. The consistency was perfect. I put it in a wrap and used some other condiments like Let Thy Food, their spicy nacho cheese, and some mustard and lettuce, and it's perfect for wraps, or you could use it for burgers too, or burger patties. And I don't really experiment with too many vegan burgers, but of the handful of the ones I have tried, this one was probably one of my favorites, honestly.
You know, I'm actually going to comment on the flavoring itself outside of the meat, although I didn't know that it was, what did you call it, Dana? What kind of protein?
Mycoprotein?
Yeah, I had no idea. I just assumed that it was, either gluten or soy-based or pea protein-based. That's pretty surprising, actually. But the whatchamacallit, the patties, the crust that was around them, it was really good. I enjoyed it a lot. It had a really good flavor, a really good texture too. It was very crispy. I find like a lot of the meat analogs that are out there, the bready texture, it doesn't crisp up like the way that the Quorn did. And the Quorn products just kind of reminded me of just like that texture that I feel like I've been missing from some of the other meatless products out there. So I enjoyed them.
It's got like a denser breading to it, like a panko with seasonings type of breading to it. But how would you compare it to the Boca spicy chicken patties? Because I know you really like those.
Well, like you said, that panko bready kind of thing, it was pleasant. It was nice. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like the Boca spicy chicken patties also, but I taste a little more of the, sometimes the meatless part of it itself, can overpower the seasoning. And with the Quorn products, I feel like there was a good balance of the two. I got the crispiness from the breading, but I also got the patty itself, the flavor from both.
Yeah, so there's one more product that we're going to try hopefully in the next few days, and it's if Shaw's has it in stock, we're going to get the Quorn vegan veggie burger, which looks like it'll be good, and we'll let you guys know probably online how that is. But if you see it, definitely pick it up, check out the Quorn section. I know most of us have learned to just walk right by it, but if you see it, take a look a little bit deeper. Right on the front, it says up in the corner, I'm vegan. So it's pretty easy to find and check it out. We definitely want to be encouraging more companies to include more vegan products. And a lot of companies seem to be moving in this direction. So I'm really happy to see Quorn doing the same thing. And if you like it, feel free to shoot them an email and let them know that you like it. I'm sure they'd be glad to hear it.
Moving on to our Q&A segment for today's podcast. Got a question on the Facebook group asking us to suggest some books. What are some good suggested reading?
So I'm actually going to suggest 2 books by the same author right now that I just recently finally purchased after longing for them for quite a while. So the books are by Eric Helms, and they are the Muscle and Strength Pyramid books, and there's one on nutrition and one on training. And I believe you can get them at muscleandstrengthpyramid.com, and it's $67 for both of the books, which is kind of a steep price to pay for 2 ebooks, but they are absolutely indispensable to understanding what is the most important things about training and nutrition. So we talk a lot on this podcast about getting your big rocks in a row before you start placing your pebbles on top. And, you really want to focus on what is going to give you the most results for the least effort, I guess, rather than focusing on all the little tiny details that aren't going to make a difference if you're not able to stick to it, for example. This tells you what order you should be focusing on. And there's one specifically for training, which is the one that I'm finding to be the most fascinating personally, and one specifically about nutrition, which I think most people who listen to this podcast will probably get the most out of that book. A lot of it is stuff that I already know in the nutrition book, but it is always great to hear somebody else's perspective, especially somebody who is as intelligent and well-studied as 𝐸𝐻𝐿, and also to hear the way that he is able to word things in layman's terms without dumbing things down too much, so that I can then help other people to learn these things as well using some of his terminology. So these books have nothing to do with veganism specifically, but if you are interested in training and or nutrition, I can't recommend them enough. Definitely check them out. And if you're wary about dropping $67 on 2 ebooks, you can also go to YouTube and the 3D Muscle Journey channel. 𝐸𝐻𝐿 has overviews that are pretty in-depth. They're like half-hour long videos about the muscle and strength pyramids for both training and nutrition. So you can check that out for free as well. All right, our next question here. I have a problem. I try to eat as much as I can, but cannot achieve my calorie, carb, protein daily goals. I'm supposed to eat 2,700 calories, but I can only eat 700. What should I do? I feel like I eat enough, but I don't.
If you need to hit like a certain amount of calories or carbs, proteins or fats, but you're having trouble eating that much volume, it's just about finding more, macro dense foods. Because if you need to eat like 2,500 calories or 2,700 calories per day to hit your goal, and you're eating lettuce and a lot of vegetables and fruits which aren't calorie or macro dense, I guess, then you're gonna have trouble. So if you need to hit a high protein goal, you don't want to be eating a lot of Brussels sprouts and broccoli all day to hit, let's say, 150 gram protein goal for the day.
So when you're finding yourself having a problem hitting your allotted macros or calories for the day, you kind of have to take a look at the foods you're eating and evaluate them a little closer and find out, and there's usually a reason why you are having trouble eating more food. I mean, obviously some of us just have a hard time eating, and there's just no way around that. But there are certain types of foods that can be a little easier to get down. They're a little more dense. One thing that I would say is at the top of that list would be liquid. Liquid calories are the easiest to consume, So you can take things like sweet potatoes or beans, and you can blend them up, and believe it or not, the calories will rack up real fast. So it's like drinking. Can you drink three cups of water? If you can, then chances are you can have a 24-ounce shake with as much as 500 calories in it. And that's already, you're more than 2/3 of the way there. The other thing that you can do is monitor your fiber intake. I mean, say if you're doing nothing but eating beans all day long and cruciferous veggies, I mean, chances are that if you're the type of person that's having a hard time eating, then you're probably going to miss the mark on your caloric goal for the day.
When I first started lifting and training to put on size, I remember reading something about Derek Treesize's bean shakes, which had 2 cups of beans and dates and protein powder and peanut butter and other macro-dense foods, and I was locking in like 1,500 calories per shake, and I was having that twice a day, which is now I wouldn't do because I know how to allocate my foods better throughout the day. But at the time, it's what I knew and what I went to because I was eating upwards to 4,500 plus calories a day. I think I was, memory serves me, like 5,000 calories, which I wish I could do that now, but you know. Yeah, so if I were to go and try to eat that in lentils and other fiber-filled foods with vegetables, yeah, I wouldn't have all too pleasant of a night.
I like what both Christian and Giacomo said here, but I also think, and this may be unpopular, but I definitely think there's some willpower that needs to happen in the beginning where you just need to accept that you're going to be full. You're going to be full and you're going to be a little bit uncomfortable. If you're used to eating 700 calories a day, which, as you already know, is far too little for any adult, it's going to be uncomfortable to even bump it up to, say, 1,000 calories a day at first. But just once you make peace with that in your head, it becomes a lot easier to accept that I'm going to be uncomfortable for a few weeks while I transition into this. And then as you do, it becomes less and less uncomfortable and it begins to feel better and better. And then surprisingly, you will probably find that your body is hungry and actually craving these calories eventually. So if you can stick it out for a few weeks by increasing calories, even if it sucks, then you're probably going to have a lot of success in the long run.
And that concludes another episode of Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. Feel free to hit us up on social media and stay in touch at Muscles by Brussels or at Vegan Proteins on most social media platforms. Also, if and when you get a chance, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes or any one of the other podcasting apps or stations. It really does help us reach more listeners. Again, thank you for tuning in. Once again, my name's Giacomo.
And I'm Danny.
And I'm Christian.
And you'll see us all next week or as soon as possible.
No,